You're listening to the Holistic Health Front podcast.
Whether you've already taken steps towards a healthier life,
or you're just starting to explore this path,
this podcast aims to help all of us live longer and more energized lives,
so we can all do the things we want and be the person we know we can be.
We bring on functional health experts, parents, professionals, and everyday people who want to make positive changes in their lives.
And we create powerful conversations about how to feel good in a fun, easy, and understandable way,
so you can live the most fulfilling life possible.
Enjoy today's discussion and let us hear your thoughts in our Powerful People Facebook group.
The information presented in this podcast is not meant to diagnose, treat, cure, prevent, or mitigate any disease.
If you have any questions about your health or the health of a loved one, please consult your healthcare practitioner.
Now let's begin.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Holistic Health Front podcast. Today, we're talking about the common denominator behind 80% of all known diseases. And those of you health coaches practitioners in the audience, you know what we're talking about already. But for the average person, it's not so obvious. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about what is that common denominator that is underneath every known, 80% of all known disease, and what causes that to happen, and what can we do to help regulate our systems to keep that in check, essentially, right? But before we get into that, we're here with Stephanie. Hey, Stephanie.
Hey, Tyler. Glad to be back. It's fun to be recording again.
Yeah, same. It's been a while for me. So, but You know what? I like this little pattern we're on. You know, we've been able to. There's certain episodes that certain people feel like they've got something that they want to say or they want to expand upon or learn about or whatever it is. And we have our team here. So, you know, we're the Holistic Health Front. Today it's just Stephanie and I, but we have the whole group that we're all kind of tagging in and out of different conversations and sharing our perspectives and everything on it.
Yeah, it's been great. And our guests have been fantastic too. Thank you to all of our guests that have been on and all our guests that are coming on. We love you guys and we want more. So don't hesitate to reach out if you've got something important that you'd like to share, because we think if you think it's important, it's probably important to more than just you. So we're tickled about that as well.
That's great. Yeah, I'm really excited about, I don't know which order we're going to be releasing all of these in, but I know we just recently did an episode on meditation.
Yep. I
know we've had a couple follow-up episodes with Dr. Aloma Gear. Talking about going over the results from her blood test.
Yep.
Which I'm really excited to. I've only listened to the first one. I haven't listened to the next two yet, so I'm really excited to keep going into that series. But definitely by the time you've heard this episode, we'll have released the episode with Dr. Bastidas about inflammation, gut health, and digestive enzymes. That was That was one of my all-time favorite episodes.
It was pretty. Yeah, I was on that one, and I was pretty blown away. Dr. B was so informative and so generous with his time that night, and I'm anxious for everybody to hear that.
Yeah, same. So we got a lot of good stuff out there. We got a lot of good stuff coming. But today we're talking about what is that common denominator that connects, that's underneath 80% of all known disease. And that common denominator is chronic inflammation.
Yes,
chronic inflammation, which is tied to stress as well. So, but chronic inflammation, meaning not just regular inflammation, because a lot of times when people hear inflammation, like that word, it sounds like the bad guy, because it has become kind of cliche that inflammation is bad. Inflammation causes this, inflammation causes that. It's not all bad, right? Like we need inflammation.
Right. Well, and inflammation is it's the body telling us that we need to address something, right? So it's part of our response to something that's out of balance. And it's actually a really, really great tool. If we can not think of inflammation as a bad guy, but inflammation is kind of that signal that's on the dashboard of your car that says, hey, you know, the engine light needs to be checked or the oil needs to be checked. You know, we never get mad. We're like, oh, thank you. It's time, to do that. And that's what inflammation is. It's actually a very smart response of the body to something that's going on. And there's two types of inflammation. There's the acute inflammation that you were talking about, Tyler, that can be from an accident or an injury, right? If I sprain my ankle, I have to go home and put it up, right? I got to put ice on it. And because it gets inflamed, it gets really huge and puffy. And we know that we have inflammation in our body. We might get a bee sting and we go home and, our hands swell up. I actually got bit by a cat. If you've never gotten bit by a cat, I am telling you, I had no idea that the cats carry specific bacteria in their mouth that our bodies can't fight off. And I kind of ignored it. And an hour after I get bit by the cat, my hand was the size of a football. I'm not kidding. Not that we're going to talk about cats, but I was like, oh my God. So that's inflammation, right? I mean, I couldn't do anything. My hand was the size of a football. It was crazy within an hour. And so I went and got some antibiotics. So that's your acute inflammation, right? There was an incident, whether it was a bite, a sting, an accident or an injury. And then we have an inflammatory response to that. So everybody knows that type of inflammation. So Tyler, talk a little bit more about this chronic inflammation. What do you mean when you say that? Let's give our audience some more information about that.
Yeah, the idea is that the inflammation happens as a way of recovery and healing, right? So
absolutely,
a certain part of the body gets all inflamed, and what that's doing is it's pushing a lot of blood into that area, right, to help heal and recover. The problem is when the inflammation doesn't go, like the inflammation is supposed to happen for a short period of time and then supposed to loosen up and let it flow normally. Chronic inflammation is whenever it doesn't loosen up, it just stays inflamed for a period of time. I don't know exactly what the period of time is that would differentiate like normal healthy inflammation, right? It depends on what it is. Like you said, acute injuries, maybe a few days, depending on the severity of that inflammation. But there's this other kind of inflammation that we carry around that is associated with our lifestyle habits, our environment, our hormone levels, dysbiosis in the gut, things like that. And it's more of like a less noticeable. I know you mentioned like acute is super noticeable. You can see it, you can feel it. Right. There's kind of this less noticeable inflammation that a lot of people carry around that's likely more internal. Right.
Well, and I even think it's fair to say that it's subclinical. Sometimes it's not going to show up as having inflammation in your body. I do want to point out there are certain tests that you can get, like you can actually get some blood work done to see if you have, inflammation markers in your body. They can check your C-reactive proteins and different things like that. And if you're one of those people that likes to test instead of guess, to ask if you have, chronic inflammation, I do know those blood tests are out there and they can be very helpful for people. But sometimes just some symptoms and stuff like that, can help people understand, because a lot of people don't wake up and think, I have systemic inflammation all throughout my body. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the symptoms that people have that they might not even think about as carrying, chronic inflammation. So aches and pains, that was kind of, a lot of people are like, I get up in the morning and, the bottoms of my feet hurt. And, sometimes my hands are really tight. I have to loosen up. People will say, I feel really stiff and achy. So aches and pains are definitely something that are related to a chronic inflammation or systemic inflammation, but anxiety can be a symptom. Blood sugar imbalances, brain fog. A lot of people don't associate brain fog as inflammation, but brain fog, depression, emotional eating, fatigue, headaches, irritability, sleep problems, weight gain. I know I work with a lot of clients that have weight issues and they've tried everything and they still can't lose weight. And sometimes it can be linked to this systemic inflammation or this chronic inflammation. In that list, when somebody says, I struggle with anxiety, the first thing they don't think, oh my gosh, I must have chronic inflammation, or I struggle with depression. It's not usually the first thing that you think, but those are symptoms that can occur when you do have, inflammation that's been in your body for a long period of time. So I just want our listeners to know, sometimes if you've got something that's been going on for a very long time and you have tried several things to fix it, you've relied on interventions of different kind and you really haven't been able to get to the root of it, it might be something to consider that inflammation might play a big role in that. So that's what we want to talk about tonight. It's kind of hidden. Wouldn't you agree, Tyler? I wouldn't say that, people come to you with very specific things like I've got headaches or I've got sinus issues or I've got anxiety. They don't say I have systemic inflammation throughout my body that, you know what I mean? That it's not something that's on our radar, but what was the percentage? You said 80% of disease states can be linked to chronic inflammation. So I think we need to pull it out from behind the curtains and, take a look at it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it definitely takes like a syndrome kind of perspective, right? Like usually just the headache itself doesn't tell you exactly what it is or just the fatigue. But if you're experiencing several of these things, then that's a pretty good sign that, hey, there's something going on inside of me.
Right. And it's
Another
lasting.
and it's lasting. Yeah, it's not going away. We shouldn't
Right.
live like that, right? It's not
Right.
normal to just live in that state.
Right. Obviously, if I'm up all night long with a baby because I'm a new mama and I didn't get any sleep and I'm up all night long with a baby, of course I'm going to be tired. Of course I'm going to have fatigue. But if I have chronic fatigue all the time, then I might be raising my hand to say, hey, what else is going on?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Like, yeah, this is talking to those of you who say to yourself, man, I am just always tired. I think I slept enough. I don't know, but I still feel tired. I'm eating healthy, still feel tired. Going to the gym, still feel tired. A lot of that can be linked to chronic inflammation. And another thing too is another sign or symptom would be hypertension, right?
Yeah,
High blood
absolutely.
pressure. It's another thing to look out for as well. So we know, so somebody listening to this, they can, and listen, if you're listening to this, yeah, tests are very helpful and they're good. Like I've gotten blood tests to see my inflammation levels. I live in Mexico, so a blood test here is a lot more affordable than in the United States. But for those of you who either don't have health insurance or you just don't like needles and don't want to go get a blood test or things like that, really, I really invite you to listen and feel inside of your body. Like give yourself space in your day to sit down and feel the things you're feeling and just kind of take note of it. And it's not a complaining session. It's more of just like an inventory session, right? And that only happens whenever we can just like give ourselves 10 minutes to sit on the couch or a comfy chair or out in nature in the park or something like that. No phone, no writing notes or anything like that. And just sit and feel and listen to your thoughts and listen to your body. I can't guarantee it, but I'm pretty sure that by the end of that session, you're going to be a lot more connected to what's going on inside of you. And if you can point to several things like, oh yeah, I've had this headache, haven't been able to sleep very well, I wake up in the morning and still feel tired, I've got bloating in my gut. You count a few of those things and like it's pretty likely that you could have some chronic inflammation going on. Obviously, we're not here to diagnose anything and we're not doctors.
Right.
So, but yeah, I really do challenge you because even if you are seeing a practitioner, which I highly encourage, like a doctor, a general practitioner, whatever it is, the more you can sit and feel in your body and be connected to what you've got going on, the better you'll be able to go communicate to your practitioner and your doctor to give them the information they need to help you fully. Because a lot of times, a lot of doctors are really good, and people like are shocked to hear me say that because most doctors are pretty good. And some doctors are really, really, really good, but they don't have all the information always. They've got tests that they can do if they have a hunch about a direction that they can search for. But unfortunately, there's just no test right now no one test that can be done to tell you everything that's wrong in your body. Who knows? Maybe with AI that might be changing here soon in the next few years, but next few decades.
Right.
The better that you can explain what you're feeling, what's going on inside of you, and sharing every piece of that goes along with it. Like it's not just the headache, but it's also the fatigue. It's also the bloating. It's also the anxiety. The better picture your doctor will have to be able to like go look for the right things in you. And I think that could help. I know a lot of people, and it's not like it's nobody's fault usually, but a lot of people go undiagnosed with whatever they've had going on for years and years, or if not decades. And my goal as a health coach is to really help try to shorten that gap, to give you the tools to feel inside of yourself, to point to the things that are right and what don't feel right, so that we can kind of shorten that or reduce that number of people that are just going around undiagnosed and unaware of what's going on inside.
Well, and giving people permission to speak up about the little things, because the little things all add up to be big things. I know as we age and as we go through life, we do a lot of justification. I'm I'm 55 years old. I am post-menopausal. I'm supposed to feel this way. I'm supposed to have less energy. I'm supposed to not sleep as well. That's not true. It's just not true. But we tend to buy into these social norms about, what's good and what's bad. And the other thing that happens is that oftentimes, nobody likes a complainer, right? And so oftentimes we'll kind of hide the things that we're feeling. We'll rally and be like, yes, of course I'll go to that dinner tonight, when all I want to do is sit on the couch and do nothing. But we don't take the time, like Tyler said, to stop and really listen to those cues from our body. The small things really do add up to the big things. And it's crazy because, it can be like this recurrent spot of acne, or, some sort of little skin thing that shows up all the time, or digestive issues, but it's the recurring stuff. It's not the one-time off things. It's the recurring stuff. And if you find yourself in a pattern of something that's recurring for a long time, you might truly be a sign that you've got some inflammation in your body. And so we want to talk about, first off, recognizing it. It doesn't have to be a swollen ankle like it happens when you sprained your ankle. It can just be a general feeling of unwellness and you don't really know why. I just don't have the energy I used to have. I just don't have the focus I used to have. I'm just kind of dragging ass all the time. That could be a sign that there's some systemic inflammation going on. And so it's okay to take inventory. I think sometimes we're afraid to take inventory. If I admit to all this shit, then what's going on with me, right? Am I falling apart? No, not at all. The body is miraculous. It can heal from anything. And that's what we as health coaches want to encourage people to understand, is that, just because you have these conditions doesn't mean you have to have them forever. They can be transitional.
This episode is brought to you by oxygen and carbon dioxide. Breathe deep, breathe slow. Are you tired of nagging headaches, body pains, and feeling like you've been steamrolled by 2 p.m.?
Ugh.
Want to feel more alive with a clearer mind, voice, and skin?
Yep.
And not to mention getting rid of that pesky BO when the deodorant starts to wear off?
Ew.
Introducing to you today, water. Did you know that 75% of American adults are chronically dehydrated? And did you know that majority of people who are dehydrated think that they actually are hydrated? That means most people are not drinking enough water. But if they did, and they realized how much of a massive difference it makes in how they feel to be hydrated, they would realize that water can change their life. So drink more water. Aim for 96 fluid ounces per day minimum for adults. Side effects include peeing more often the first couple of weeks, but don't worry, it will slow down soon. I know I should really drink less caffeine. I just wish there was some way of getting energy in the morning without a coffee. The sun! Wait a minute. I feel good. Especially when I close my eyes and stare at the sun through my eyelids. Wow, this is great. I think I'm ready to crush this day now. Thanks, sun. The sun. Use it for free with care. We'll be getting back to the show in just a minute, but first, I want to really encourage you to join our free community on Facebook. It's called the Powerful People Community, and it's a place where you can interact with other listeners of the show, including me, our other coaches and co-hosts and everybody. And it's a place where you can ask questions publicly or anonymously. You can request episode topics, you can share your story, and celebrate with a group of really amazing people who will also be celebrating you. So we really hope to see you in the community. We think we're building something really special because we believe when you bring together a group of powerful people, there's just so many great things we can do in this world, more than we could do on our own. So we're building a special community and we hope to talk to you there soon. Now, let's get back to the show.
So let's talk about some of the things that might cause this chronic inflammation or this systemic inflammation, Tyler.
I'm glad you went there because a lot of times when people, like myself included, like a lot of times whenever we become aware of an issue, like, all right, I did my 10 minutes of sitting and I'm like, okay, I identified these things. I think I have some chronic inflammation. My brain usually goes to, what should I do? What do I do? Right. And that's also what a lot of people get when they go for like a general like a general, if they go to like the emergency room or whatever to go for whatever reason, a lot of times I talk to family members, I talk to friends, I talk to clients, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I went to the emergency room, and it was because I was feeling this, and they gave me this that I need to take, and that'll make it go away." But I tend to ask, did they say what caused this? And every single time, without like, do they have any ideas what caused this? And every time, without fail, no, we didn't even talk about that. It never came up, right? And so whenever, and it is a good place to start. If you notice that you've got something going on in you, like chronic inflammation, the answer to what you should do or what you could do oftentimes stems from what caused this to happen, right? So I'm glad you went there first instead of what do we do when you have chronic inflammation?
Yeah.
I think the first step is identify what might have caused this.
Right. It's more of a functional medicine approach is finding the root cause, as opposed to in allopathic medicine. We do a great job of treating symptoms, and thank God we do. If you've ever had a full-blown allergic reaction where you're breaking out in hives and you're struggling with breath. I mean, my daughter is allergic to peanuts. You do not want to see a peanut allergy. I mean, it's life-threatening and it's scary, right? And so, thank God that we do have symptomatic relief for those types of things. But it's understanding what the root cause is and backing up from there and seeing if we can't not necessarily safeguard ourselves, but set ourselves up, for more stability in the long term, and less aches and pains and less, just more well-being, basically. So let's talk about that. So let's talk about some of the things that can cause chronic inflammation. So you want to go first, Tyler? Because I got a whole list of stuff.
Yeah. I'll just go off of my personal, like
you betcha.
My
Jump
life
in.
right now, there's a lot of things that can cause it, and I know Stephanie, you've got a good list there. So maybe I might be able to cross a few things off of this, but this is just my own personal experience. Some of the biggest causes of inflammation in my life are, one, food allergies and sensitivities. I have a lot, and because I have a lot, I not often, but more often than I should, will just eat something that I have a sensitivity to or that I have a slight allergy to because it's not extreme and it's tasty. So, but I know I'm very aware, okay, this is causing inflammation in my body. And if I eat this thing several times a week, well, then I've just got chronic inflammation. It's not giving it time or space to go down. Another thing is the city I live in is a big city. It's polluted. They're actually right now downstairs in the garage replacing the doors on the garage. And so there's dust going up in the air, things like that. Another thing is sleep. I don't get the most restful sleep. It's actually been one of my biggest challenges in my own life. So it's gotten better recently, but it's still more room for improvement. And I've just had so much time throughout my life of poor sleep that it's something that's going to take more than just a few weeks of getting good sleep to catch up on. I'm aware of that. Another thing, exercise too. I go to the gym several times a week, and I know that, that's not chronic. That's not chronic inflammation, but if I'm not proactive about recovery from the gym, it could be. So that's just some things that come up in my life. And then stress, of course, too. Stress is probably one of the biggest causes. Well, yeah, it's all connected. So
it is. And that's the thing about this, is that trying to separate it out and find one particular thing, that's linking to it, you're never going to do it. We are multidimensional beings, and we live in these vast worlds, where our culture is full of all sorts of stuff. But there are things that we know that we can do that can make a difference. And I'm going to go back to the sleep thing. If we don't sleep, our body doesn't regenerate, rejuvenate, and restore. Sleep is actually an extremely productive time for your body. And we live in this hustle culture where we are rewarded for what we can produce. Productivity is number one, and rest is kind of poo-pooed. And so it's super important to recognize the role that sleep plays in helping mitigate stress and helping mitigate inflammation, because that's when our bodies are restoring. That's when our bodies takes the time to heal from all the stuff that we've done during the day. So I don't want to underplay that one. And that one's free. It's so funny. We get on these calls and everybody's like, what can I buy? What can I do? Just close your eyes and get some rest, So sleep is a big one. Not getting the proper type of sleep. And if you've been struggling with sleep, there are things that you can do. Pay attention. Are you getting enough minerals in your body? Because minerals play a role in how the brain functions. Choline, magnesium, different things like that. But that is a huge one. And Tyler, you talked about food allergies and food sensitivities, but I want to go back to the diet and talk about how we do have the standard American diet. We call it the SAD diet, SAD, standard American diet, the SAD diet. And the reason for that is that it has a lot of pro-inflammatory foods. So we have a lot of highly processed foods. We use a lot of preservatives in our foods. And those things, when we do them over and over again, can definitely cause our bodies to struggle with clearing out the toxins. And that can cause inflammation, right? Some backup from all of those foods that we're eating that we're not, clearing out all of the toxins from. So our high sugar, highly processed foods are definitely going to play a role. Not just your food sensitivities like Tyler talked about, but we really need to look at what we're eating. Our bodies weren't designed to have highly processed, high sugar foods all the time. A little bit's fine. It honestly, truly is. This is not to demonize, the fun foods that we put in our body, but to recognize that they do play a significant role in our long-term well-being. And sometimes just mitigating that a little bit can have a huge change. I'll work with clients that are like, well, there's no way I'm giving up ice cream. And I totally high five because there's no way I'm giving up ice cream either. By the way, I make the best damn homemade ice cream on the planet and you're just not talking me. Oh, it's so good. You're just not talking me out of it, right? So it's not about giving that up, but it's, making sure that, you can find time in between when you do those things to give the body time to rest. So, I'll have clients that are like, okay, during the week I can, cut out these processed foods or these highly sugar foods, but every Sunday night at, grandma's house, she always serves her favorite apple pie. And you absolutely have to have the apple pie, especially one made by grandma, right? It's full of love and yumminess and it's blessed, and so, but pay attention to your diet. I know that a lot of people can make a huge difference just by eliminating a few of the really highly processed, high sugar foods. So diet plays a huge role. And Tyler, you mentioned it, but stress. It's this catch-all phrase that we all use, right? Stress. But let's talk about what stress does, what it actually does to the body. You elevate your cortisol levels, which is that stress hormone. Your adrenals get involved, and all of a sudden the body's working on this fight or flight, and we tend to be in fight or flight a lot more than our bodies were ever intended to be. Our fight or flight mechanism in our body, which is that stress response, was meant, to be used when we were running from a bear, right? In caveman time, we would all everything was cool. We slept when the sun slept and we were awake when the sun was awake. And, the only time we really hit the stress response is, when we were facing some sort of immediate, imminent danger, like running from a bear. Now our bodies tend to flip over onto that sympathetic nervous system, that stress response all the time. We get a buzz on our phone and we get stressed, right? We get a text, we get a call, we look at an email all day long. We go through the lights, the traffic, all this type of stuff keeps us in a chronic state of stress, which can lead to chronic inflammation. So I think it's really important to not blow those off. We tend to want the little silver bullet, like, oh, it's got to be this one food that I'm eating, or it's got to be this one thing that I'm doing. And it might be this overall lifestyle that, we could step back from and maybe make some changes to.
So if we know that stress, lack of sleep, diet, nutrition, another thing we didn't mention is hydration.
Yeah, it's huge.
If we know these things are what are causing the chronic inflammation, so if we turn that around and say, okay, so what do I need to do to help my body have a healthy inflammatory response? Well, that it kind of answers the question for us, but like, what are some things there that we can use that information to do to help reduce stress, sleep better, make better food choices?
Yeah. Isn't it the question that we all are faced with today? How to manage our time better so that we can find more time for rest and more time for sleep. Managing our time better so that we can have time to maybe prepare a meal instead of go through a drive-through, right? Because your packaged, processed, high sugar, high salt foods, are a little more difficult for the body to break down than your foods that are, in a more natural state. So I don't think there's a single answer, but we can just talk about, some of the things that you and I personally do, but it's a tough one. You know what I mean? This isn't a podcast that's like, oh, we've got the answers. It's a podcast to go, hey, let's create some awareness around this, because it's not an easy fix. It's not easy to slow down when you're working, full time, maybe even 2 jobs so that you can put food on the table. It's not easy, to turn everything off and have a good bedtime routine, especially when you've got kids. And it's not easy to make a healthy meal. I mean, let's face it, it is so much easier to grab something on the go that's processed and than it is for me to stop and go to the grocery store and, find some, whole foods, clean vegetables, clean meats, and come home and prepare a meal. So it's not an easy fix. It's not an easy fix at all. But it's something that's super important. And I think we should, whether we ever come up with an answer for it, I think we should continue to talk about it and maybe just kind of weigh in on some of the things, that we do.
Yeah.
That make a difference.
Let's break it out by category.
Okay.
Let's start with stress. Obviously, stress is something that's going to be like, our goal isn't to remove stress, right? Just like with sugar, I hear a lot of people say, I'm on a sugar-free diet. And I'm like, I don't know how long that's going to last.
Yeah. Anything restrictive like that is just not sustainable, right?
Yeah. So the idea isn't that, like, our goal isn't to remove stress from our life or to not feel stressed, but our goal is to have a healthy response to stress. And so what do we do when we feel that kind of a thing? For me, for example, I often feel stressed when I'm working, right? Not often, but like that tends to be something that causes stress, or if I'm thinking about finances or things like that. And I can feel my chest tighten up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I can hear my brain start going a little faster, like the thoughts are going a little bit more erratic. And the best thing I can do in that moment is just notice it. And my favorite thing to do is sit back, focus on my posture, and just blow that stuff out.
Yes.
One good breath. It's amazing what one good breath can do for your nervous response.
It truly is, you guys. You don't see us before we start this podcast, but every single time we get on this podcast, we have this little talk before we hit the record button. And we always do this deep breath. Sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 2 or 3, but all of us collectively will be like, wow, that really did bring my stress level down. Breathing is such a powerful tool. It's so powerful. And I know we've had a podcast about breath work, and we can talk about all the unique different types of breath work. But you know what? We don't have to make it that hard. Just 2 or 3 deep, full breaths can make a huge difference to bring down those cortisol levels, bring up those endorphin levels a little bit. But that's a fantastic thing. Just pay attention to when you're holding your breath or when your breath starts to get irregular, and just sit back and be like, okay, this is free. This is absolutely free. It's not going to cost me anything. I know this is my big thing that a lot of people say. They're like, I can't do it because I'm at work. And I'm like, you know what? I am sure every single person that's sitting in the room with you right now at work could probably use a deep breath too. So it's okay to say out loud, hey guys, let's collectively do one big sigh. Everybody in and everybody out. Oh, that felt so damn good. Let's do it again. Everybody in, everybody out, and
if one of your colleagues frustrates you too, you're going to find yourself doing that automatically without even thinking. there too.
Right, exactly. So taking the time to breathe is so huge, and just stopping to do that's a fantastic thing. In the moment, one of my other favorite things to do is to shake like a duck. If you've ever seen ducks on a water, they kind of glide really smooth and they're just out there, but they'll cross paths with somebody they're not wanting to cross paths with. And there'll be this little quack, quack, meh, meh, that they do. And then as they're going away, they do this kind of little shake and shudder to shake it off as they go on. I tell everybody a little bit of shaking can make a big difference. And I know that sounds silly, but I call it the jiggle. My kids make so much fun of me. You have no idea. But to just jiggle your body, to just shake off, to shake out your hands and shake off your body. You could do it 10, 15 seconds. You will be shocked at how different your body feels if you shake like a duck. Physically shake like a duck, But those are some of the things that we can do in the moment, right? We can breathe. We can do a little jiggle. Sometimes we can just get up and walk away from what we're doing. Excuse yourself. Say that you have to go to the restroom, and change what's going on. Those are huge things in the moment. But I want to talk a little bit about pre-paving. And what I mean by pre-paving is, Tyler, you nailed it on the head when you said this isn't about avoiding stress. We're not going to get around it, right? This is where we live. This is the society that we live in. But doing some pre-paving where we set ourselves up so that when we are faced with a stressful situation, our stress response is not already wound up. We're not already wired so that the smallest thing sets us off, right? And that's where you have to come up with some sort of daily practice to pre-pave for your day, and maybe that's a breathing routine. Maybe it's exercise. Maybe it's meditation. Maybe it's putting your pet on your lap and petting your dog, in the morning, or, maybe it's some sort of walk after dinner at night. But it really does make a huge difference when we balance ourselves with things that bring us joy, spending time with our family, spending time laughing. Oh my gosh. Spending time laughing. If we could all just spend time cracking ourselves up, for 30, 45 seconds a day, the endorphins that are released, the connection that occurs, the oxytocin that occurs when you laugh with somebody. Oxytocin is that bonding hormone. All those types of things help modulate the stress response, which helps lower inflammation. It is scientifically proven that things like oxytocin, the bonding hormone, endorphins, from whether it's exercise or other things that we do, those connections actually lower our stress, the cortisol levels in our body that actually affect inflammation in our body. And so giving ourselves permission to do things for ourselves that are good, that really, really feel good, Yeah. Music is huge. I mean, maybe you listen to music, maybe you read a book, but finding something that brings you joy and helps center you is huge for helping with that.
Yeah,
what do you think, Tyler?
Pre-paving, I like that. Yeah, it's just like anticipating that there's going to be stressful moments, and the best thing that we can do, in the most ideal world, we would have a routine on a regular basis, probably a daily basis,
right,
of just doing these types of things that help to strengthen our nervous system. And by strengthening our nervous system, I just essentially mean like give it. I think of a nervous system, like when I think of the nervous system, I just think of like expanding ourselves, right? And our ability to feel certain things and sit with that feeling and be okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can anticipate that there's probably going to be moments that are challenging, like when we wake up in the morning, it's okay to think like, okay, like something's going to stress me today, and that's okay. And I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
And here's a regular routine that I do on a regular basis, whether it's meditation or, hey, people who when they take their shower and they turn it all the way cold for like 30 to 60
that's
seconds
a good one.
On a regular basis. I'm telling you, those people can handle stress better than most others, because you realize in that moment, and really cold therapy is such a great, like, I feel it feels so synonymous with stress response, because
it is.
When you get in that cold water, it is full on stress response. Like every part of your body just screams. But when you can sit in that, and the secret with cold therapy is the more you can just focus on your breathing and being still and not like squirming or shaking or hyperventilating, the more that you can just focus on your breath, keep it calm, keep yourself still, and sit with that feeling, the more tolerable it becomes. Now, cold therapy, do it, like, be careful if you do cold therapy, like don't just go do it yourself if you've never done it before. Not
Right.
saying to do that, but it's very similar, because when we feel that stress, a lot of times when we feel that stress and then we respond by hyperventilating or letting the mind get the best of us, right?
Right.
That's, if we can just expand ourselves in those moments and feel it and breathe through it and just let it come and let it go, because this too shall pass. And
Yeah.
I think the mindset is really important too, is just understanding that, hey, I felt this bad feeling before and it went away. It's going to go away again.
Mm-hmm.
And then also knowing too, when things are really, really good, just knowing like I really enjoy this moment because everything's really good. I know it's not always going to be at the complete high. At some point I'm going to feel it's going to come back down again. But what I need to do is remind myself in those moments that, hey, this too shall pass. Enjoy the good while it's happening. Just be okay when it's bad, when it feels bad, because it's going to come back to good again.
Yeah.
Sooner
Except
than later, a lot of times.
Well, accepting what is, acceptance of that moment is huge, knowing that we're here and being okay with it. Part of that pre-paving that you talked about, one of my favorite things is to do a gratitude practice. And I know it is different for everybody. I encourage people that go into an office that have a computer that they flip on every morning. I say, flip on your computer and find a spot. I don't know if you've got a certain notes section or somewhere on a Word document, but spend just 2 or 3 minutes every morning being grateful for something. That's a great way to pre-pave. It's just, I am so grateful that I had a hot shower this morning. I'm so grateful that I got clothes on. Did you know I actually have shoes that don't have holes in the bottom of them? There's just so many things to be grateful for. And I'm grateful that I'm sitting at this job, and yes, it annoys me, and yes, it has a lot of burdens, but it's bringing me a paycheck. And that's bringing food to my family, and that's putting nourishment in my body, and just finding just 2 or 3 minutes a day with gratitude is, talk about some pre-paving power. Gratitude is huge. I like the idea of journaling. Some people say it out loud, but that's a great way of pre-paving. Yes, the exercise routines are great, and the meditation is great, and going to the gym is great, and the breathing is great. I agree with all of that, but sometimes just a small little 2 or 3 minutes where we're grateful, that can change your biochemistry as well. And that's a big one. So that's another thing that we can do to help modulate that stress response, which of course will help modulate the inflammation response in the body as well. Because that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about what we can do, to feel better. That's basically what it is,
So that's stress. Stress is one of the things that causes chronic inflammation in the body. That's stress. The other thing we talked about is diet, nutrition. And obviously, one of the first steps that I tell a lot of people to do, this isn't obviously a blanket statement for everyone, but go get an allergy or sensitivity test and find out what foods your body's responding to, right? Because it's not always obvious.
It's not. It's not.
A lot of times it's actually really common that I come across people who went and got an allergy or sensitivity test and realized that one of the staples or several staples in their diets, like one of the things that they eat the most, is causing them inflammation every single time. And they thought it was healthy, because it usually is, right? For me, it was blueberries, right? Blueberries are very good for you for most people.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I have a sensitivity to them. So I'm eating a lot of blueberries every day, because I read a quote somewhere that if you eat a couple blueberries a day, then your mental health, it's like you're 10 years younger or something like that. I read that meme on Instagram one time, and I was like, oh, I'm going to eat a bunch of blueberries then. And I did for months and months and months. And then I found out, oh, oops, that's causing, so a good place to start is to go get one of those tests. They're usually covered under your health insurance. If not, I don't know. I don't live in the US, so I don't really know about what prices are nowadays on these things, but it's totally worth it because you might think that you're eating something. You might be spending extra money on a certain food thinking that this is healthy and good for you, and it's actually doing more harm than good. So
Yeah.
that's something to consider.
Well, and that's a huge thing to consider. I love that because you said, like nuts, for example, nuts can be really, really great. Oh my gosh, there's so many antioxidants and there's great protein and there's great fat. You got your omega 3s in your nuts. But if you have a nut sensitivity and you don't even know it, and you're eating handfuls of walnuts because they are good for your brain and they are good for your hormone health, and you find out, just like you did with the blueberries, you're like, oh, wow. And so it can make a huge difference, just the elimination of that one thing. So I think that's a great idea. If you think you're somebody that's been stuck with some chronic issues that you can't seem to get over and you really want to try to figure it out, I think a food sensitivity or food allergy test is a great idea. I completely agree. I've got a list here of some of the most pro-inflammatory foods, and they're under general categories, but I'm going to read those out loud. So it's not going to surprise anybody that on the top of the list is sugar. And this is not to villainize sugar. There's sugar in all sorts of things, but our highly processed, sugar-packed foods, can definitely be pro-inflammatory. Vegetable and seed oils. Pay attention to what types of vegetable oils and seed oils that you have. Sometimes your corn, your canola, your grapeseed, your peanut oils, those can be very pro-inflammatory for some people. Safflower, sunflower, somebody can be, cooking something in, sunflower oil every day and have no idea that that's what's causing. They might even be making their favorite Italian dressing. They use a little bit of vinegar and oil and things like that with a pro-inflammatory oil. So look at your vegetable oils. You can go to the internet to look at those that are the most pro-inflammatory, but look at your oils. And then there's some anti-inflammatory oils. Your things like your avocado oils and, there's coconut oils and different things like that are actually anti-inflammatory oils, that you can be consuming. But again, if you're allergic to avocados, you don't want to put avocado oil in your body. Going back to what Tyler said, right? You might want to test. So just pay attention to that. But here's the top ones: your sugar, your vegetable oils, processed meats. That's going to be, your canned meats and your meats that are processed. Artificial preservatives can definitely be pro-inflammatory. Trans fats. Read your labels, guys. Trans fats, anything that is containing a trans fat. Basically, a trans fat is a fat that's been converted through some sort of chemical or heat process that no longer makes it the type of fat that the body can recognize, break down, and utilize. So it's been transformed into a fat that's not in its natural state. And that's what a trans fat is. I mean, that's kind of the simple definition of something that's very, very scientific and very chemical. So trans fats. Refined carbohydrates, those are your highly processed foods. Pre-roasted nuts, because of the oils that they use for those. Synthetic pesticides and herbicides. And alcohol. I know no one wants to hear that, but alcohol is a pro-inflammatory. So when you do consume alcohol, just consume it, conscientiously and something that works for your body. And for a lot of people, gluten definitely can be a pro-inflammatory. And that's not for all people. So I don't want everybody to get off this podcast and think they have to give up their favorite, piece of cake or whatever. But it is something to consider if you're struggling with issues that just seem to be recurrent for you and, you haven't been able to get to the bottom of it. So we talked about food testing. We talked about some pro-inflammatory foods. What is some other stuff that we can look at when it comes to the food category?
Yeah. I know you have a list of anti-inflammatory foods as well. But before we go there, you mentioned staying away from herbicides, pesticides. And I know the average person is like, well, it's not like I'm just going to go drink some herbicide or pesticide. Like it's, how do I avoid those things if they're just putting it on our food already?
Yeah.
And for me, that's where the conversation of organic, farm to table type things come to mind for me. My biggest reason for eating organic is a lot of times people just don't, the average person doesn't really know why would I go spend extra money to get organic when I can just get the non-organic one, but it's the same thing, right? They're both peppers.
Right.
They're both strawberries, whatever, but like one's organic, it's just more expensive. What's the difference?
Right.
It's not always this case, but in a lot of a lot of times it is the case that organic uses a lot less of those
Yes.
herbicides, pesticides, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't even realize it, because that's the thing that's so defeating about this sometimes, Tyler, is that you talk to your clients and you talk to your friends and family, and they're like, listen, I'm doing all the right things. Like, oh my God, I'm eating all my fruits and vegetables, right? Tyler, you were eating all your blueberries. They're so high in antioxidants. They're a great brain food. But why am I still not seeing the results? And it could be that these fruits and vegetables are carrying some of those herbicides and pesticides, that aren't good for the body. So, looking for organic can make a huge difference for sure. GMO stuff as well. There's been a lot of research on non-GMO and GMO foods, and GMO foods have been known to cause an inflammatory response in certain cases as well. So pay attention to those as well, because it's got to be so disheartening. I mean, I know clients come to me and they're just sad and they're worn out and they're so over it. They're like, I've been doing all of that and I still feel bad, so helping just kind of peel back the layers and say, it might be the herbicides or pesticides, organic might be, a choice, or non-GMO might be a choice, because it feels like you've been trying so hard, or the types of oils, you might need to change it just a little bit. I tell everybody, a 10% tweak can create a 90% improvement in outcomes, but it can be very overwhelming, and it's bio-individual. Like, by the way, I eat blueberries all the time and I don't have a sensitivity to them and I think they're amazing. But gosh, if you woke up and found out that you did, then, you wouldn't be doing the right thing for yourself. So that's a really good point.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And then the preservatives as well.
Yes.
My thing is I try to avoid, for the most part, this isn't like a blanket statement that is always true, but in a lot of cases, if you just avoid the cans and the boxes, you're avoiding a lot of preservatives, right? Instead of canned tomatoes or canned corn or canned green beans or whatever, I'm just going to go get the tomatoes, the green beans, the corn, whatever.
Yeah.
Whole food, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean from Whole Foods. That means like I just go to my market down the street that sells, farm fresh veggies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Opting for that kind of stuff over the can makes a huge difference in the preservatives. Now, this is the thing that the thing that comes up often for me is they use words like preservatives, and there's different ways of preserving your food. We're not saying that all preservatives are bad, because I'll tell you right now that when my grandma takes her tomatoes from her garden in the fall, and she'll put them in, I don't know exactly what she does. I'm not an expert on preservation. Actually, I've been wanting to learn more about it, but if you've got veggies and you're soaking them in salt water or in vinegar, you're preserving them that way. That is so much healthier for you than getting the preservative cans from the store, because there's different kinds of preservatives. Just like how there's different kinds of ginger ale. My brother got sick last week and he called me up and he's like, "Hey Ty, I'm sick, but don't worry, I'm drinking some ginger ale." And I was like, "All right, bro, but just so you know, I mean, it's totally cool that you are, but I just want you to know that ginger ale isn't helping you feel better. Like that's not healthy ginger ale. You're drinking that because it tastes good to you, not because it's making you healthier." He's like, "But I thought that if you get sick, you're supposed to drink ginger ale." I was like, "Yeah, but like real ginger. If you go get real ginger and you put it in some water, make a tea with it, and you drink it, then that's a healthy ginger ale." But so it's the same with preservatives, right? Like some preservatives are better than others, just as some ginger ales are better than others.
Right. And in a bind, if your child is throwing up while you're on a 12-hour drive to Washington, D.C., and all you can buy is the Canada Dry ginger ale that's in the store, it does help. It's not the perfect, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's all just varying degrees, right?
Does it help? Does it help? How does it help?
Oh, God, yes. Oh, yes. Every time. Every time.
Is it like a placebo, or does it?
No. There's something, especially when it comes to the nausea and the upset stomach and the vomiting, there's something about the carbonation mixed with the ginger in the ginger ale that actually does help soothe the nausea.
Interesting. Do they use real ginger in ginger ale, or I just assumed it was like an artificial flavor with corn syrup?
No, certain ginger ales do have real ginger in them. Yes. Yes. Yeah. 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 It is definitely, it was used in my house the whole time I was growing up to get ginger ale. When you have nausea and upset stomach, we use ginger ale. Yeah. And when we're traveling on the road and my kids are like, my tummy hurts and I need to throw up, and little sips, little tiny sips. We're talking, teaspoon at a time. We're not talking a glass of ginger ale, but there's something about the carbonation with the ginger that actually does help when you have a upset stomach.
Interesting. Yeah, I love to use sparkling water and real ginger
Yeah, that's great.
with, what is it? One of those things that you use to shred. You hold it. It's like what you would use a block of cheese on to shred it.
Yeah, yeah,
What's
yeah,
this
like a
called?
grinder.
Yeah, something like that, right?
Like a grinder or shredder. Yeah,
So take a piece of ginger,
Yeah.
put it in a cup, and then mix it with some sparkling water,
yeah.
a little bit
You
of
can
lime.
actually, yeah,
It's
you can
amazing.
actually, you can suck on a piece of ginger too. You can literally like buy ginger in a thing and suck on a piece of ginger. Here we are getting off on a tangent. This is what we do when we talk. We go down all these little tangents, but yeah, paying attention to your food. And you guys, this isn't about doing an entire overhaul. Oftentimes you already know, like I'm telling you, you already know. You're that person that every time you go out, you don't have any problems, and then you try this, and every time you have that, you go, I don't feel as well as I used to. So pay attention to how you feel immediately after consumption, like within 10 to 15 minutes after eating. Take an inventory check. Like Tyler said, sit back and listen to your body. Have I got a headache? Am I feeling a little more stiff and achy in my hands? Is my stomach just a little bit unsettled? Like your body will talk to you. We just kind of blow it off, but your body will talk to you. Your body is very smart, and you personally are very intuitive. And we tend to we don't like to admit it, right? Because nobody wants to give up their nachos, when they're going out with friends. But sometimes it might be something small. You might need to have pork nachos instead of beef nachos, or whatever. But listen to your body. You are the expert of you. And if we don't say that enough on this podcast, we need to. You are your best advocate, and you are the best expert of you. And obviously we want you to seek guidance, from people that can help, give you direction and give you resources, but always listen to your own personal internal guidance, because your body knows. I mean, I know the things that bother me, and I know the things that I'm totally fine with too. So, and sometimes it can be something small. I had a girlfriend that said that she couldn't have lactose at all. And I said, okay, that's fine. But I happened to make my famous ice cream that I was just talking about earlier. And she's like, oh my God, I just have to have some. And she actually had a little bit of my homemade ice cream. And she said, you know what? That didn't upset my stomach. And I said, well, when I make my homemade ice cream, I make it with 100% organic milk and 100% organic cream, 100% organic half and half. I use organic unbleached sugar, and I use pasture raised eggs, and my vanilla is organic. Like everything I put in my ice cream is organic. And she said, oh my God, I wonder if it's not that I'm lactose intolerant, but I'm intolerant to some of the preservatives and things that are in your traditionally bought dairy products. And so it can be very, like I said, it can be very like, oh, I didn't realize, because they expected to have a reaction to my ice cream and they didn't. And of course, my ice cream is filled with love and joy because I love to have friends and family over and make it. So there's a lot of energy behind it as well. That's really positive. So that's a tangent in another place. So, all right.
Yeah. I just want to underline one thing that you said really quick before we go on to the next part.
Absolutely.
It's not about doing a complete overhaul. Like you are the expert of listening to your body. You are intuitively more aligned, in tune with what's going on inside of you than anybody else outside of you could be. And you could probably identify a few things that you could do for your health, right? Like you're probably like, oh man, I'm not sleeping well. I'm eating canned tomatoes and all these things. It's not about making all these changes at once. Just pick one that you feel like you could do right now. It's not a matter of picking the best one or the thing that's going to have the biggest impact. It's like, of all the things you could do right now, which one do you feel the most ready to do right now?
Yeah.
and pick that and do that for some time until it becomes a habit. And then the next thing will be the most obvious to you, right? So there's not this stress of just being perfect or fixing everything. I tend to, like, as health coaches, I don't know about you, Stephanie, but for me personally, I don't want to think about a bunch of different things at once, like I
Right.
tend to just focus on one thing at a time. I continue to do other things because I've created habits, and I let some things drop off and kind of backslide a little bit at times while I
Mm-hmm.
focus on another thing. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't like thinking like, and I've got to do this. I've got to put my phone away an hour before bed so I have my hour of no electricity before bed,
Right.
and I've got to make sure I food prep, and I've got to make sure I'm drinking enough water, and I've got to make sure I'm going to the gym, and
Yeah.
make sure I'm taking my supplements. It's like, no, for the next 2 weeks, I'm just hyper focused on making sure I'm taking all the supplements that I've agreed to for this time.
Right. Yeah.
And I know the rest of the stuff I'll continue to do out of habit, and some things may slip, and that's okay. I'll come back to them.
Yeah. And it is truly baby steps. Oh my God. If everybody wants the quick fix and they want it fast, but it is absolutely the baby steps that lead to the sustained change. Because Tyler, you couldn't be more right. You talked about, and I got to get to bed, and I have to turn all my electricity off an hour before I go to bed. How about we just start with 10 minutes? How about we just start with 10 minutes? And instead of adding 8 cups of water a day, if you didn't drink any, how about you just start with 1? It is shocking how different 1 cup of water a day can be for somebody who doesn't drink water at all. And by the way, that's a thing that's going to help reduce the inflammatory response, because waters help flush out toxins, and toxins can cause an inflammatory response in the body. So I know we haven't talked about it yet, but water, and then more water. Water plays a huge role in flushing out toxins and hydrating our brain and our tissue. It makes our blood flow, and blood carries nutrients throughout the body. Water is super valuable, and we just don't spend enough time talking about the value. One of my favorite things about this podcast is telling people all the stuff out there that's available that's not going to cost you a thing. Like drink more water, sleep more, breathe more, love more, laugh more, kiss more, hug more, smile, like gratitude. It doesn't cost you anything. All these things are available to you right now, tonight, and that's one of the things that I want people to know, is that there isn't a silver bullet out there. And there's so many things that are right in your grasp right now. So, keep that in mind. I'm going to really quick read some anti-inflammatory foods, and I'm literally just going to laundry list these. For those of you that are wondering how I got this great information, it's called the internet, and I printed it out about 10 minutes before we got on this call. So if I can find this on the internet, you can find this on the internet, but I wanted something that I could just read off really quickly. So here are some anti-inflammatory foods to consider.
As Stephanie's reading these off, don't try to memorize everything she says. Notice the ones that stand out to you. Notice the ones that you're like, okay. And then like in the end, she might list off, I don't know how many she's going to list off right now.
3,000.
What 1 to 2 to 3 things do you remember at the end of it that like really stood out to you? Focus on those.
Because it's what resonates with you, right? It's not about getting everything on the list. I love that you pointed that out before I read that. So I'm just going to read this list. It's called the top 20. There's 20 of them. The top 20 anti-inflammatory foods, those things that help reduce inflammation in the body. First one, berries. And I know you talked about blueberries. For you, Tyler, that wasn't the same. So berries are on the list. Fatty fish, olive oil, avocados, tomatoes, broccoli, almonds, seeds, peppers, citrus fruits, walnuts, grapes, leafy greens, ginger, turmeric, legumes, green tea, cherries, garlic, and everybody's favorite, dark chocolate. So that was just an article I found on the top 20 anti-inflammatory foods. So there was some good stuff in there, guys, right? There were some fun things that we can do. It's not all about giving up those things that aren't good. We can incorporate some really fun things from that list. That
one that stood out to me as you were saying it is for me personally, green tea, because we have green tea sitting in the kitchen. It's easy to do. It's not like a huge obstacle for me to start drinking some green tea every once in a while.
Yeah.
I just personally would want to do it in the mornings because caffeine sticks with me for a long time. So when I hear that list, I almost don't remember. I mean, I could, if I think about it, I could list off the things you said, but I could just disregard almost everything you said and say to myself, okay, green tea, that's mine.
Right. Well, and I encourage people, get online, find your own list. And if those things, like Tyler said, stand out to you, if there's 2 or 3 things you're like, oh my God, I love avocados. I can make avocado toast every morning, right? Or whatever. I could cut up avocados and put them on my, scrambled eggs, or, lean into the things that are fun, that are interesting to you, and that are things that you're going to want to do. Don't grab the stuff that you resist. Resistance it's not a great way to start any sort of routine, right? I hate leafy greens. Why do I have to eat leafy greens? Leafy greens are fantastic, but find another way to find an anti-inflammatory food to incorporate into your diet. The other thing that I want to talk about before we get off this, because I know Tyler and I could talk for hours, I want to talk about the, we've talked about stress with the mental, but I want to talk a little bit about the emotional support and how that can actually affect your inflammatory response. Our emotions play a huge role in our physical and mental well-being. So make sure that you're taking time to nurture how you feel. Find somebody that might spend time with you that makes you feel good. Somebody that can validate how you're feeling without going down the rabbit hole with you. We have those friends. All of us do. All of us have those friends that, when you're having a bad time, they can validate what you're doing, but sometimes they go down the rabbit hole with you. When you're like, grab your pitchfork, we're going to kill somebody. And they show up 10 minutes later at your door with a pitchfork, and, some other sort of weapon. You're like, wait a minute. We don't need to get that crazy about this. Or the person that's like, absolutely, I understand how you felt that way. I probably would have felt that way too. But, everything happens for a reason. Let's find a way that we can look at this through a different lens and, maybe find not necessarily the joy in it, but the curiosity in understanding it, So I don't want to ignore the importance of our emotions and how they affect our physical being, thus affect our inflammatory response. Feeling heard, feeling secure, feeling safe. If you're not feeling safe, guys, since your what's it called, fight or flight, your sympathetic nervous system is triggered a lot if you're not feeling safe. And find people, places, and things, whether it's a book that you read or a show that you watch or a podcast that you listen to, find ways to be able to connect to your emotions, and all of them. Emotions don't exist in a vacuum. We've talked about this before in other podcasts. We tend to only want the good emotions, right? But all of your emotions come from the same place. And so when you dumb down, the anger or the fear, you're also pushing down your ability to express joy and happiness and love. They all come from the same box, right? They don't exist in a vacuum. And so it's okay to have a whole myriad of emotions. And those emotions that are uncomfortable, let's get curious about them and maybe find a way to talk about them, express them, process them. And I don't know if that's with a friend, a family, a therapist, a loved one, journaling, writing, humming. What's crazy? Humming is such a good thing to do. It stimulates your vagus nerve and it just makes you feel better. My daughter called me out the other day. She said, Mom, you hum all the time. I'm always humming when I'm doing something, whether I'm, if I'm doing something physical, I tend to be humming quite a bit. You'd be surprised at how relaxing humming is. But I do want us to talk about how important our emotions are in the overall picture of stress and inflammation and our well-being. They're not to be ignored.
Definitely not. Yeah. It's better to say I'm frustrated than to say I'm not frustrated.
Yeah, I know. I can tell, Tyler, you're not frustrated. But we tend to hold. We do. I don't know what it is. So there's, we put everything in this box of good or bad, right? And there are these good emotions, and then there's bad emotions. That's just not true. Anger is a powerful emotion, right? It's an emotion of transition. It's an emotion of motivation. It's an emotion of you kind of know where your limits are, right? When you bump up against that anger like that, you're like, wow, this is a refining moment for me. This is where I draw a line in the sand, and it allows you to take inventory of what you value, right? And what what your belief system is and what you're willing to do. So it's not about putting them in a certain category, but if all you're feeling is anger, let's get curious about why. And, seek some consultation from someone, something. Some people can find it in books, friends, internet, therapist, your religious leaders, oftentimes your pastors and different people of different, wherever you feel comfortable reaching out for that. But I just didn't want to ignore that, because we spend a lot of time when we talk about health, talking about our physical body, and it is only a small piece of the pie. Our mental and emotional and spiritual dimensions of ourselves are huge. And they play such an important role to our overall well-being. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't bring that up when we were talking about inflammation in the body.
Definitely agreed. Yeah. And it's hard having a therapist is incredible. Makes such a difference in life overall, and just our ability to carry things, feelings and things like that. And having great friends, like between therapist and great friends and family, it's hard to find things that are better than that. Mm-hmm. But another resource that exists out there is our Powerful People Facebook group. And it's meant to be a space where we can all share together safely and have each other's backs, and have a space where we can say the things that maybe we don't feel ready yet to say to the people in our life, or whatever it is, right? So use the group. It's a really powerful resource. We're all in there. Everybody on this podcast is in there. Fellow listeners of the show. It's just a place where we can come together and share these types of things and get some perspective and some feedback. And like you said, sharing things with people sometimes is, you didn't say this exactly. It's how I perceived what you said. But like sharing things with other people, it helps us to regulate our own nervous system, right? Like sometimes it's helpful if we're feeling stressed or anxious or whatever it is. If we can call up our friend, or if we can go on the Facebook group and just say like, I'm feeling this happened. I don't like that, blah, 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 blah. Just the act of doing that and sending it out, it's like a transfer of energy. It's almost like you're teleporting that out of your body.
100%. Oh my gosh, the power of getting it out is huge. And if you don't want to do it publicly, if you don't have somebody that you can go to, and by the way, Tyler, I couldn't agree more. A therapist, they're amazing. Absolutely amazing. What therapy does is incredible. I've seen it in my life. I've seen it in, my friends and family's life. So it is absolutely beautiful. And or a friend, that can hold the space for you, because there's the friend that goes down the rabbit hole with you. And then there's the friend that, can hold the space for you, to process whatever you're processing. But getting it out there, it is something powerful, whether you want to journal or, type it into something. That there is something so powerful about just getting it out. I find that I will go to the computer and I will start typing, and I will send an email to myself. So when I say to myself, I literally mean to me, Stephanie. It's my email address. But the person that I will address is the person that's creating, or the situation that's creating the anger. So in this example, let's just say it's my husband. I'm not picking on my husband. Let's just say that there was something with my husband. And I will say, knowing that I can connect on an energetic level with him because we're so close, we've been together so long, and he and I weren't able to talk because he was busy or whatever, I will just say, dear husband, and I'll talk about everything that I want to talk about. And by the second paragraph, I feel better. By the third paragraph, I feel even better. By the fourth paragraph, I'm like, oh my God, I love you so much. This is great. I'm so glad we have this time, and I will send it to myself. But what I know is that energetically, I sent him that beautiful message because I was able to express it, fully and freely. There's something really powerful about getting it out. And sometimes I've had people say that they've written to people that have passed away, or they've written to, God, or they've written to their spirit guides, or, dear guardian angel. And sometimes it's not the sweet stuff, like, dear guardian angel, what the hell? You were supposed to be watching over me? And why the hell am I, like, get pissed. Like, what? Are you effing kidding me? What is going on here? And then what you'll find is that your ability to reach out, and in that sort of recognition, you'll find there's a two-way flow, whether you realize it or not. There's always a two-way flow, because energy that goes out, circulates and comes back in. So find a way to express, process how you're feeling. It's a huge part of the healing process.
Definitely. So, yeah, I mean, I think this was a really productive conversation. I know we also mentioned sleep.
Oh,
We
it's
have
huge.
we have a whole episode where we went deep into sleep and talked about like
Yeah.
all the different areas of that. You can go check that out. It's in season 1. We dive deep into sleep, deep
Yeah.
sleep. Another
It's huge. Yeah.
Yeah, another previous episode that we did that's super helpful on this topic of chronic inflammation is our episode with Dr. B, Dr. Bastidas,
Yes.
where we talked about enzymes, digestive support, things like that. That's the first episode of season 2. You can go back and listen to that one. Proteolytic digestive enzymes, if taken on an empty stomach, have very powerful anti-inflammatory agents in it. So that's something to consider. But any last words that we should share before we wrap this up?
Our podcast on breath work, that one was a really good one if we want to talk about breathing. And no, just think about it. If you're one of those people that's like, I just can't seem to get over this, whatever it is, if you've had something for a long time, you might consider that you've got some systemic inflammation that's gone undiagnosed and undetected, and finding ways to eliminate that inflammation can have huge strides forward in getting your body to feel better.
100%. So thank you so much for listening to the Holistic Health Front podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe, and go to the Powerful People Facebook community or wherever you're listening to this episode and drop a comment and let us know what's one takeaway that you're taking from this episode. What's one thing that you can either do or think or feel or remove or add, whatever it is. What's one thing that you can do to help improve your body's inflammatory response? One idea that you've gotten from this episode. Let us know, and we will talk to you in the next episode. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye for now.